MILLERAND. Concerning the case of Millerand and the question of party union, I wrote at the invitation of the French comrades on the occasion of the last annual convention of the Labour Party, the Marxists, at Epernay, the following letter. Dear friends, you know that I have made it a rule not to interfere with the affairs of the socialists in other countries. But as you wish to know my opinion on the burning question that is occupying the attention of the whole laboring and socialist portion of France, and as many of your countrymen who have wholly different views upon this question from yours have also turned to me, I have no longer any reason to withhold my opinion. The situation with which you are now occupied in France is, at bottom, not a foreign affair as to Germans. The internationality of socialism is a fact that is daily becoming more evident and more significant. We socialists are one nation to ourselves, one and the same international nation in all the lands of the earth. And the capitalists, with their agents, instruments, and dupes, are likewise an international nation, so that we can truthfully say there are today only two great nations in all lands that battle with each other in the great class struggle, which is the new revolution, a class struggle on one side of which stands the proletariat, representing socialism, and on the other the bourgeoisie, representing capitalism. While the bourgeois world of capitalism continues and the bourgeoisie rules, so long are all states necessarily class states, and all governments class governments, serving the purposes and interests of the ruling class, and destined to lead the class struggle for the bourgeoisie against the proletariat, for capitalism against socialism, for our enemies and against us. From the standpoint of the class struggle, which is the foundation of militant socialism, that is a truth which has been raised by the logic of thought and of facts beyond the possibility of a doubt. A socialist who goes into a bourgeois government either goes over to the enemy or else puts himself in the power of the enemy. In any case, the socialist who becomes a member of a bourgeois government separates himself from us, the militant socialists. He may claim to be a socialist, but he is no longer such. He may be convinced of his own sincerity, but in that case, he has not comprehended the nature of the class struggle, does not understand that the class struggle is the basis of socialism. In these days, under the rule of capitalism, a government, even if it is full of philanthropy and animated by the best of intentions, can do nothing of real value to our cause. One must keep free from illusions. Decades ago, I said, if the way to hell is paved with good intentions, the way to defeat is paved with illusions. In the present society, a non-capitalist government is an impossibility. The unfortunate socialist who casts in his lot with such a government, if he will not betray his class, only condemns himself to impotency. The English bourgeoisie offers the best example of weakening the opposition by permitting them to participate in the government. It has become the traditional policy of all parties in England that the most radical member of the opposition, who is naive enough to be taken in, should be given a place in the government. This man serves as a shield to the government and disarms his friends who cannot shoot at him, just as in battle one may not shoot at the hostages that the enemy has placed in front of itself. That is my answer concerning the question of the entrance of a socialist into a bourgeois government. Now, as to the second question, the question of unity and agreement, the answer is dictated to me by the interests and principles of the party. I am for the unity of the party, for the national and international unity of the party. But it must be a unity of socialism and socialists. The unity with opponents, with people who have other aims and other interests, is no socialist unity. We must strive for unity at any price and with all sacrifices. But while we are uniting and organizing, we must rid ourselves of all foreign and antagonistic elements. What would one say of a general who, in the enemy's country, sought to fill the ranks of his army with recruits from the ranks of the enemy? Would that not be the height of foolishness? Very well, to take into our army, which is an army for the class struggle and the class war, opponents, soldiers with aims and interests entirely opposite to our own, that would be madness. That would be suicide. On the ground of the class struggle, we are invincible. If we leave it, we are lost because we are no longer socialists. The strength and power of socialism rests in the fact that we are leading a class struggle, that the laboring class is exploited and oppressed by the capitalist class, and that within capitalist society, effectual reforms which will put an end to class government and class exploitation are impossible. We cannot traffic in our principles. We can make no compromise, no agreement with the ruling system. We must break with the ruling system and fight it to a finish. It must fall, that socialism may arise. And we certainly cannot expect from the ruling class that it will give to itself and its domination the death blow. The International Workingmen's Association accordingly preached that the emancipation of the laboring class must be the work of the laborers themselves. Undoubtedly, there are bourgeois who, from a feeling of justice and humanity, place themselves upon the side of the laborers and socialists. But these are only the exceptions. The mass of the bourgeoisie has class consciousness, a consciousness of being the ruling and exploiting class. Indeed, the mass of the bourgeoisie, just because they are a ruling class, have a much sharper and stronger class consciousness than the proletariat. I conclude. You have asked my opinion, and I have given it to you. It is for you to do what the interests and principles of the party demand that you should do. Fraternal greeting to the convention at Epernay. Long live the France of the socialists and the laborers! Long live international socialism! W. Liebknecht, Weimar, August 10th, 1899. I have nothing to add to my letter. The events since then have justified it. The presence of a socialist in the government has accomplished nothing and prevented nothing that could not have been accomplished or prevented without this presence. On the other hand, insofar as the social democracy has caused or endorsed the entrance of a socialist into the government, it has become, in part, responsible for all the sins of omission and of commission done by the government during the time in which a socialist was a member. the situation in France. It may be said in excuse or justification that they have acted under extraordinary conditions to rescue the Republic, which would otherwise have been lost. This excuse will not stand examination. The Republic of France is not upheld by a few men in the government, including the socialist, but by the French laborers, with whom the greater part of the peasants and small bourgeoisie stand side by side, and also by the great majority of the French people, who do not allow themselves to be led astray by the priests nor coerced by the reactionary capitalists. Militarism is by far less strong and dangerous in France than in Germany, and the French army is to a much greater extent than in Germany a people's army. The army is as large as in Germany, although the population is 15 million less. It contains, therefore, a larger percent of the total population. France is actually at the point where it must break with the Prussian-German military system, which it adopted after the War of 1870-71. It must either do as the Minister of War, General Gallifet, has recommended, replace it with a well-drilled Praetorian Guard, or enter at once upon the militia system and arm every person capable of bearing arms. A coup d'etat is impossible with such an army, no matter how reactionary a portion of the officers may be. The mass of soldiers are too close to the people to be used for such purposes. If, as has been represented to us, the actual formation of the Waldeck-Rousseau ministry was necessary to protect the Republic against a coup d'etat, then the Republican sentiment of the French proletariat was security enough for the government. In every way, a far better security than the participation of a socialist in the cabinet. The circumstance that the chief of this ministry was a particularly clear-cut capitalist, and that the Minister of War was one of the most notorious saberers of the Little Napoleon, and one of the most bloodthirsty murderers of the communists, made the impropriety of Millerand's action all the more evident. But even if, in place of Waldeck-Rousseau, there had been a genuine Democrat, as for example Brisson, and in place of Gallifet, an honorable soldier not yet stained with laborers' blood, the step would have been no less objectionable from our standpoint, though it would not have wounded the feelings so much. Class antagonism, accompanied by the class struggle, is now an existing fact. The state is, so long as this class opposition and class struggle exists, necessarily a class state, and the government of this state, with like necessity, is a class government. The socialist who allows himself to become a member of such a government will soon lose his class consciousness if he has not already laid it down at the door of the cabinet like a Mohammedan does his shoes at the entrance of the mosque, unless he has the courage to seize the first opportunity offered for a conflict and a break. I do not care to busy myself with the purely scholastic question as to whether a case might ever possibly arise in which a socialist should enter into a non-socialist government. Such an occasion could only arise after a catastrophic overthrow of the state, for example, during the course of a world war, when the government of a class state had broken down, without the necessary elements being yet present for the formation of a socialist state. Such an occasion has certainly not yet arisen in France, and perhaps the last persons whose mission it is to rescue the government are just these same Waldeck-Rousseau and Gallifet. It is the Socialist Party, which was and is and remains the only party whose mission it is to be the rescuer and safeguard of the Republic. and this with or without Millerand. Gued and Lafargue, the leading representatives of scientific socialism in France, have set forth in a scathing critique of ministerial opportunist socialism the distinction between the activity of a member of a popularly elected body and an officer of an executive body of the government itself of the established state. The participation in a popularly elected body, Reichstag, legislature, common council, is on the contrary an expression of popular sovereignty, which, though it is subject to the influences of the class rule, is really above it, and is the only power that can make an end of it. The representatives of the social democracy in such popular bodies are like the basalt blocks which, pushed up from the interior of the earth, have broken through the sandstone and slate strata. They arise from the heart of the people, are a part of the people, and have in themselves the right and power of popular sovereignty, which overtops and dominates all political and social matters. They are not there by the grace of the powers that be, but against their will and in spite of their power. Servants, to be sure, but honorable servants. Servants not of the possessors of power, but of the people who have chosen them to secure the realization of their sovereign will. Therefore, it is fundamentally incorrect to designate our activity in the Reichstag and other representative bodies as a compromise with the ruling powers. To be sure, we have to work there together with our enemies, but as an independent power, exercising the mandates we have received from the people. That is no cooperation upon the basis of common views and aims. It is a labor that is a battle, a mutual struggle, a measuring of forces whose play, direction, and intensity, according to the eternal law of the parallelogram of forces, results in legislation and government. It is in the nature of things that out of this mutual wrestling and struggle, changing groups and momentary contacts should result. To call such momentary groupings compromises is a pure distortion of terms. A coming together as a result of conditions, and a working and striving in the same direction owing to circumstances, is just as little a contract, an alliance, or a compromise as the reciprocal touching of the pieces of glass in a kaleidoscope is a contract, an alliance, or a compromise. Whether the shaking power is a mechanical one or is the force of organized law is all the same. Such approaches are without any obligations, are productions of the moment, born of the moment, and swept away with the moment. Independent action is the only thing that is practical. Fault has been found because I said in a newspaper article that a new anti-socialist law would be less evil than the abolition of class antagonism and party lines through fusion with the Prussian Progressive Party in the legislative elections. The more I consider it, the more I am convinced of the correctness of this position. What is to become of our party if we allow ourselves to be pressed out of the path of our principles by threatened or threatening dangers and disadvantages? fear is proverbially a poor advisor for human action. For a party, it is destruction. Fear of the labor movement and socialism has caused the political downfall of the German bourgeoisie, and the days of the social democracy are numbered as soon as the cry of fear finds a response in us. We should not challenge, but we should not sound the alarm and be misled by fear into taking steps that do not accord with the principles, the nature, and the honor of our party. One does not disarm an enemy through timidity and gentleness. One simply emboldens him. Not that we should seek to run our heads through a wall. We wish to be, and must be, practical. But has this ever been denied or questioned? We have always been practical. Bernstein, to the contrary, notwithstanding. We have always based our efforts on existing conditions and worked methodically with our eye upon the goal. In cities, states, and empire, all reasonable improvements have at least been supported, if not proposed, by the social democracy. Think only of the greatest of all reforms, the reform of the social evil, in which the government, if it does not wish to build ruins or air castles, must take hold of the demands made by us over 10 years ago. We can say of ourselves that not only are we practical, but that we are the only practical party. Practical in the sense of reasonable. Only those who recognize the organic laws of development and systematically strive in harmony with them towards a definite goal are practical, and this is the way we work. Our opponents either do not know these laws, or else, if they recognize them, they seek to bend or break them. Whoever seeks to compel water to run uphill is certainly not practical, and such is the foolish aim of our opponents. To be sure, it has been said that the laborers cannot alone secure the emancipation of the laboring class, that the intelligent and cultured elements of the other classes must cooperate with them. We are pointed to the many measures useful to the laboring class, which are enacted or supported by the bourgeois parties. But this is sophistical reasoning, for, and on this point, the evidence of Bismarck is decisive. None of these social reform measures, and surely they are few enough, would have ever been enacted without the initiative and the pressure of the proletariat and the social democracy. Bernstein claims that socialism is the ultimate outcome of liberalism. To claim this is to absolutely deny the existence of any class antagonism. This sentence was reversed by Michel, my former comrade in Comunismo and present chancellor in Re, so as to read, liberalism is the ultimate outcome of communism. And that the liberalism of Michel is very near to conservatism in the German sense. That is, to the agrarian medieval ideal of personal bondage, everyone knows who has ears to hear and eyes to see. No, social democracy must remain for itself, must seek for and generate its power within itself. Every power outside of ourselves on which we seek to lean is for us only weakness. In the consciousness of our strength, in our faith In the world-conquering mission of socialism lies the secret of our extraordinary, almost miraculous success. Islam was unconquerable so long as it trusted in itself alone and saw an enemy in every non-Mohammedan. From the moment when Islam entered upon the path of compromise and united with the non-Mohammedan, the so-called civilized powers, its conquering power was gone. With Islam, it could not have been otherwise. It was not the true world-redeeming faith. Socialism, however, is this, and socialism cannot conquer nor redeem the world if it ceases to believe upon itself alone. Therefore, we will not turn from the old tactics, nor from the old program. Ever advancing with science and economic development, we are what we were, and we will remain what we are. Or the social democracy will cease to exist.